I am Hamish, this is Stan, and this is Civil Banter. We're two civil litigators at Nelligan Law, helping people through injuries, insurance fights, and all of life's legal curveballs. So today we're talking something a bit more serious and maybe lighter on the banter because today's episode we're going to be talking about the floods that occurred in Ottawa on Canada Day on July 1st. Stan, I mean, whereabouts were you on Canada Day? Were you local?
I was not. I was at the cottage and flood free over there.
Yeah,
Did rain a
good.
lot, but I was lucky, and not everybody was. So yeah, we'll try and keep it respectful today.
Yeah. I was doing a bit of driving in the West End, so I wasn't part of if you saw on like X or on the news any of the really devastating pictures of like the highways flooded out. I didn't see that, but I did see some of the flooding. And yeah, it was really like biblical levels of rain. And
Build an arc territory.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, really. And the affected areas from what I've read, it sounds like Beaverbrook was hit pretty hard, and then the Bayshore area and kind of Crystal Beach.
Beach, and I've got family in Craig Henry area, and
Mm-hmm.
they had some flooding as well. And then just west of that, a neighbor on my street had some flooding as well. Thankfully, I did not, but pretty widespread,
Yeah.
quite widespread. I did see those photos of the 417,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, you would have needed a boat to go down
Mm-hmm.
the 417, which is pretty incredible. I've never seen that level of flooding in Ottawa before.
Yeah, and so the aspect we want to talk on, as might be obvious, is we want to talk about the insurance issues that arise in the situations like this, because not only are people there dealing with the fact that they've lost their possessions, uh, you know, the least of their problems is, but their Canada was certainly ruined, and they're probably now going to be in for months, potentially years, of getting this all addressed, the administrative burden, and then also dealing with their insurance coverage. Sometimes things go perfectly, and the
Those
insurance,
lucky few, right?
yeah, sometimes that aren't too many questions, and things work out as they should be, but more often than not it's going to be some level of dispute or fight to make sure that um you're getting coverage for what you paid for or what you think you paid for.
Yeah, well, I think other than house fires, floods are probably the number one or number two thing that people think about when they have a home insurance policy. I know we've all seen the ads on TV that the insurers take out of people standing knee deep in water in their basement and calling up their insurance adjuster, and they're all happy to help you on the commercial, but we understand through our work experience here and through the calls that we've already been receiving from
Hmm.
people that that is not the experience that many people are having.
Yeah, so on that note, I think first we'll talk about some of the insurance coverages that we often see are available.
Yeah, why
Uh,
don't you run us through those?
so, when it comes to flooding, there's a lot of different causes of flooding. So, there's the classic, and I think you had this recently, a washing machine breaks, and that's like leak from appliances.
Yeah.
Then there is overland water. So that would be in situations like this, presumably, but it depends on the policy how it's defined. But it would often be an escape of water um, from like a river overflowing and then coming overland and then entering a property. Sewer backup is very common, where basically the local infrastructure and sewerage system gets overloaded and then water comes up.
Up. And that is like some of the worst case scenario because that's not rainwater that's coming up the drain.
Yeah, exactly. So that has big consequences in terms of remediation to do with basic health and safety. Like all water damage claims can have an element of outside of damage, but health and safety as mold can set in. But sewer backups in particular. Um, then we also have things related to, if you live in an area with a high water table and you have a sump pump installed. For example, on Canada, there are all these power cuts, like where I was at my mother's house in Canada, and there were like repeated power cuts throughout the day. So if you have a sump pump, designed to get to deal with the water table and high groundwater, if that fails because of a power cut and you don't have a battery backup, now your sump pump's not doing its job anymore. So those are kind of the big types of coverage we see. How it's defined in the policy really depends on the policy, and a lot of the disputes can end up being in these types of claims really technical, legalistic disputes about definitions of words.
Right. Yeah. You see that in the declining of coverage that people are told either, this is not a type of loss, a type of water damage that we insure, or it's not a coverage you purchased, or there's an exclusion that applies, or it's outside the quantum. So there's a number of different reasons that an insurance company may throw out there as to why they're not going to cover a loss. And I would say for the vast majority of people, this is not well understood. And they may be confronted with a denial in coverage and be completely lost as to how to respond to that denial in coverage. Do they, are they in a position to effectively negotiate this with their insurance company? Do they need an outside opinion? It's a lot. And then you're dealing with that denial in the context of trying to actually repair, remediate your home, get moisture out so that things like mold don't spread. It can be very stressful.
Yeah, as you said, the one of the issues is the insurance company, they're the expert in insurance and you're the homeowner. And if they're saying there is no coverage for this, it can feel as a consumer very much like, well, that's the end of the road. But it often isn't the end of the road, and there is room to negotiate and discuss. So, in terms of what an insurance policy looks like at a top level, you've probably all seen one, but basically, there's the declaration page, which is the top level list of coverages saying things like policy limits, um, deductibles, basically heads of different types of coverage. So you'll often see, an amount for dwelling, meaning the physical building, an amount for contents, that's your personal property within the building. And then there might be, in some cases, there might be stuff like accessory buildings.
Like a separate garage or a shed.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there'll be liability, which is something we're not talking about today, but that's, you go out and hurt someone in the world and they sue you. And then there'll be additional living expenses often, which is in the event of a loss that requires you to move out, go rent an Airbnb, stay at a hotel while these repairs are being affected. People often have that type of coverage too.
And that'll usually be the first page that people will see on their policies, and it's all listed on that first page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the declaration page will also point to something we'll talk about a bit, which are called endorsements. So they might say whether your policy has an endorsement, which is also sometimes called a rider, but they're basically additional forms that modify, usually by extending further coverage than the base policy. And
Typically see that on things like jewelry, if you've got a exceptionally expensive engagement or wedding ring, or if the sum totality of the jewelry in the house exceeds the, I don't know, $15,000 set aside for it under the policy, often you'll see a rider purchased in those circumstances. That's just an easy example of one.
yeah, and often flood related claims do have endorsement, or sorry, flood policies will have endorsements that specify more than the usual types of coverage, and they often have almost like branded names, like um, homeowners excellent water everything coverage plus or something.
Yeah, comprehensive plus, whatever. Yeah.
So those will be all described on the declaration page at a top level, mostly showing the limits of insurance, like how much are they going to pay if something goes completely wrong, the deductible, stuff like that. Then we get into the body of the policy where you'll first have the big distinction is all perils versus named perils. And it is kind of what it sounds like. If it's named perils, then they're going to be describing specific causes of losses that
Yeah, why
are
don't you
covered.
take it back a step just for the viewers? What do you mean by peril?
Peril is a happening or a cause of damage or loss
like a
to
fire or
a
a
building.
flood,
A fire, a flood, a tornado, a
wind
hailstorm,
damage.
a
Yeah.
theft, missiles.
Missile, yes. You'll see those exclusions for
Yeah,
war and terrorism and stuff on
yeah.
your policy, nuclear bombs, etc.
Aeroplanes falling out of skies.
Yeah,
So those are all the different types of perils, and then named perils is just as it says, we're naming what perils we are covering.
there'll be some specifics about the perils.
Mm-hmm. All perils is all perils subject to the following exclusions. And then it will go into what types of perils are specifically not covered. So it could be all perils,
Right.
but again, as you said, it could be, well, war
War
or
is always excluded.
I think riot and kind of societal breakdown is sometimes excluded.
We'll have bigger problems then.
Yeah.
If the society collapses,
Yeah, and I think the kind of motivation or the basis behind some of those exclusions to all perils is basically like if something is so widespread that it's affecting everything, then that really goes to the solvency of the insurance company. And if
Right.
it's an all perils policy and probably earthquakes, I don't think that comes up as much around here, but
There are, it depends on the policy. I've certainly seen earthquake exclusions,
mhm,
but I'm sure you could buy a policy from some companies with earthquakes included.
mhm.
Depends on where you live. I don't think you'll get one in San Francisco.
And then, so you have either the description of the perils, or you just have the all perils, and then the exclusions. Like we are not covering this, we are not covering this, we are not covering this. And then you'll get the endorsements, and there's other stuff there too. There's procedural type in the event of it. This is the procedure you have to follow, and those are important too. But the final part is going to be the endorsements or riders, which, as we discussed, they're additions usually, or sometimes subtractions, but they're changes to a policy, usually to extend coverage, and they'll often have their own definitions, which it's hard to read them together, but they're often sort of substitutions. Like we say this is excluded in the base policy, but in this endorsement, it's actually included instead of excluded, but we're also changing the definition a bit. So, so clear as mud. As Stan said, often jewelry, artwork, if you have
Right, that's a big
collectibles.
one. Yeah.
So,
If again, say if it's especially valuable to you financially or otherwise, and you'd really miss its replacement or you'd be out of pocket quite a bit, it's very prudent to get a separate quote or to be crystal clear from your broker that that item or items would be covered in the event of a loss.
mhm.
Often the riders are not that expensive relative to the cost of the policy
Yeah,
itself.
you could be talking like $22 a month for quite a lot more coverage.
Yeah.
Um,
Are we going to shift your gears here to the basis of valuation now?
yeah, let's move into basis evaluation. So, again, these are technical terms that kind of sound like what they mean, but as usual, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, that'll be the sort of theme, if you haven't picked up on it already, is everything is fact dependent. Every lawyer is going to tell you that, but these are especially fact dependent, and they really are driven by the policies themselves, which do vary from homeowner to homeowner, neighborhood to neighborhood, city to city. So we can't say with any real precision what your coverage might end up being. All we can say is that it is policy driven, and that when I say policy, I don't mean government policy. That obviously plays some role, but the insurance policy you purchased, it's a contractual arrangement.
So replacement cost is basically like for like replacement. So as an example, and it applies to both contents, and then it also applies to repairs. So contents, I have a plain white t-shirt. It's damaged in a flood. I report it to my insurer. I have replacement cost coverage for contents. I'm entitled to money to basically go to Walmart and buy a plain white t-shirt. A
Table
new,
that receipt, and they pay you for it. You
like
have replaced the item.
like for like, equivalent. What I couldn't do is I couldn't go and buy a Gucci white t-shirt.
Right.
So it has to be like for like when it comes to contents. It's kind of a bit more of an art than a science. It's um, like for like is there's a lot of room to kind of wiggle in there, but more so when it comes to repairs, that's when it gets really tricky.
Yes, we see that on, on significant water loss files or fire loss files, especially with an older home where you're not able to do exactly what was in place in, say, 1975. The building codes are different, the materials are different. You literally cannot replace it with an identical item. It's a little bit harder to say what is like for like in that situation, but it happens, and every case is evaluated differently.
Right, and I think one way to think about it would be if you've ever, purchased a home or bought a new build or something, you might hear reference like builder grade. So if you're kind of the finishes in a room, meaning paint, baseboards,
Yeah.
trim, insulation, lighting, if all that stuff can generally be considered builder grade and it's damaged, your replacement cost is, well, you can get it repaired such that it's equivalent grade. If you had a super high-end home with luxury finishes, marble, granite, um, stuff like that, then you would be entitled to the replacement cost of the same grade of finishes when you get the repair quotes done. So often, if there's three different repair quotes, an insurer is going to be going through that to get an assessment of which one is actually replacement of like for like to the extent that it's possible.
Yeah, and so that's not the only basis of valuation. And when we say basis of valuation, we mean, compensation that you're going to be paid or that's available to you. So replacement costs, we just covered. What's the other basis of valuation that we see on these policies?
So the other one is actual cash value, which isn't really that descriptive, but it basically means in the t-shirt example, the
Yeah.
contents, if I bought a t-shirt from Walmart 10 years ago, it is not how much does it cost for me to go and replace that. It is what is the actual fair value of a 10-year-old white shirt from Walmart?
What would somebody pay you for it?
And the answer is often very little.
Yeah, very little.
And the same principle applies for repairs. If you have while obviously property values can increase, that incorporates things like land value as well. But if you actually have a house that was built in the 1970s and you're being paid based on the actual cash value of the repair or the damages, in terms of the repair bill, the actual cash value of a basement that was constructed in the 1970s is again not going to be that much. However, there are some weird things, right? Like, as you said, some materials are no longer used, and some finishes might have had, in principle, an unusually high value that were standard back then but are not there now. But generally speaking, the actual cash value amount is going to be significantly lower than the replacement cost.
Yeah, unless there's some kind of like antique ceiling maybe that is not available these days, the odds are that your actual cash value will be lower. You
Hmm.
gave the t-shirt example. I like to use the example with clients of furniture.
Hmm.
Often, you'll pay a lot for new furniture, and nobody would pay you what you paid for that furniture even a few years after you bought it, let alone, a decade or more. And so if the insurer is offering you the actual cash value of your couch, it's going to be considerably less than the replacement value of the couch. So usually with things like that, we do see the insureds go out and purchase replacement items because the actual cash value falls well short of what they actually need, which is a new couch.
Right. And some of these policies work in a way where it's basically you'll get paid the actual cash value, and then once you replace it, you'll get the replacement cost. That's obviously a tricky situation to be in because when they give you the actual cash value, you can't necessarily just afford to incur the replacement cost.
Right. If you lost everything, if your house has totally been demolished by, a massive flood or a fire, or the whole basement's been damaged by water, and you're given 1/3 of what it costs to replace those items, it's asking a lot for these clients to go out and foot the bill with, you know, no guarantee of payment from the insurer, or no guarantee certainly of timely payment from the insurer. It's a lot for them to do.
And then on a similar note, some policies have both bases evaluation depending on what choices you make. So
Right. I think you can always opt for the actual cash value, right? Even if
yeah,
you've been given a replacement, you purchased a replacement cost policy, typically the insurance company's more than happy to tell you, actually, we'll give you the ACV if you want it.
yeah. And so when it comes to repairs, again, it's very policy dependent, but some of the aspects to that might be you might elect to take the actual cash value if you have no intention to do the repairs. You're
Right. You
like,
don't
I'm
want to
not,
rebuild. You don't want to refinish your basement. You're just gonna like gut it and leave it.
yeah. So yeah, so that could happen in a situation where you did have a finished basement, but you're like, I
Not
don't
that
want,
important to
yeah,
me. Want to turn it into a home gym. Not gonna refinish it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to spin back up a bit just to a legal principle, or a couple of legal principles that are important to how all these claims are considered. And insurers don't necessarily vocally shout about this because it's not helpful to them,
Hmm.
but it's how we think about all insurance policies. And it is this: it's that if there's a term of the policy that gives coverage, it's going to be interpreted by the courts broadly as possible to enable you to get coverage. If there's an exclusion, it's going to be interpreted very narrowly to make so that the insurer has to be as specific as possible when they are removing coverage. So let's think of an example. Um, all perils coverage, and then there's an exclusion for hail. Well, it's kind of tricky.
Hail's pretty cut and dry.
Hail's pretty cut and dry. If it was an exclusion for um, missiles,
Right.
and let's say a tree
Yeah. Sure.
fell
Sure.
through your house,
Yeah.
or someone pushed a tree and
Right.
then the tree fell through your house, it's like, well, they're gonna construe narrows extreme, or they're gonna construe the exclusion for missiles extremely narrowly, and if it's not on one of those very specific defined things, they're not going to say anything falling through or anything being thrown,
Airborne.
anything airborne. They're not just going to say, well, it's a missile. It's going to be very specific to the wording of the exclusion. So it could be missile thrown by person in anger. Like it could be someone throwing a rock through your house, not covered.
Right.
Almost anything else flown or airborne and hitting your house, they're gonna say, well, it's not narrowly within that exclusion, and we interpret coverage broad, exclusions narrow, so there's coverage.
Yeah. Like, what if the ventilation from a neighbor's roof, those roof vents, if that comes off, it's airborne, it hits your house, is that a missile? Probably not.
Right.
Right. So I think the court would probably rule in favor of the insured on that one and say this is not going to be an excluded item or an excluded peril. And why is it that that's how courts have interpreted this?
Because there's an imbalance in power. It's an unequal bargaining relationship, and you can't go to your insurance and say, can you change the wording on this definition? Like, there's no, here's the insurance policy, take it or leave it. You can add coverage if you want to pay more, but you're not going to be able to negotiate the terms of what is, in essence, a contract.
Well, it is, and the rule in law is that the drafting party of a contract, which in this case is certainly the insurer, that if there is an ambiguity in that policy, it will be ruled against the person who drafted it. Certainly, extremely so in a case where it's an insurance company that's doing that. They also have a good faith to deal with they have a good faith duty to deal with their insureds exactly in that manner, in a good faith manner, which means, interpreting things in their favor if there's some ambiguity. We don't always see it in practice, but that's what the law is.
Yeah. So, I think we'll move on to just a bit about the claims process in terms of steps someone should take if they're involved in an insurance claim. And it's really going to be similar in all types of insurance claims. And it's going to be similar if the insurer is treating you well or if the insurer is treating you poorly. It's basically about evidence and proof and requesting everything as much as possible to be communicated to you in writing.
Yeah,
And
I'm going to say this off the hop. These, what happens to people, floods, etc. It's awful. It's unpleasant. Nobody's happy to be dealing with it. It's very difficult. It's stressful. Our advice to you in this regard is never going to be sitting back and doing nothing. It will be to be doing something, and that will be hard sometimes for people, but they will always be better served by doing something than sitting back and doing nothing.
yeah, and everyone has, or most people have other jobs, other things to be doing, but the more you treat like this like a job too, in terms of inventory, like taking pictures of stuff before you throw it out. We all have camera phones. It's not that difficult to just every time you find an item damaged or after the damage, or ideally, as the rain is falling, you would have videos showing how bad the rain was. When the water gets into your house, you can get a video of that. It's going to be very helpful when it comes to establishing what the cause of the loss is. But when stuff is damaged, this is damaged. I'm not just instantly throwing it out, taking a picture of it, having, a notepad somewhere. This is what this is, estimate of how long you've had it, estimate of what it cost you.
Yeah. Is it a pain in the ass? Absolutely. Is it something you wish your insurance company would do for you? Also, absolutely yes. Is it something that in practice the insurer is going to do for you? Sometimes. But if they're met with a large volume of losses all at the same time, and I'm not excusing the behavior of the insurers, don't get me wrong on that, I'm not. But if you've got thousands of people making flood claims all at the same, it will naturally overwhelm the capabilities of your insurer, and you may be waiting a very long time for them to come by and do some of this stuff for you,
Yeah.
if they do.
And the claims they're going to move most expeditiously on are the ones where an insured person has sent, here's a spreadsheet in this room. This is what was in this room. There was a TV. There was a sound system. I bought the sound system 15 years ago. It cost this amount of money.
Right. Here's a link to the Best Buy replacement of today's value replacement of it. Okay, this and I'll go buy it.
Yeah, that's it.
It's definitely a lot easier if you do those things. Not only because you've made the life of the adjuster easier, and anytime you can make somebody's life, this is just general advice, you make somebody's life easier, they're going to be easier on you and easier to deal with, and it will be faster. But from a lawyer slash evidentiary perspective, you're going to win. Like if you've itemized your claim and you've got a photograph of the item and it's obviously damaged and you've linked it to a replacement cost item, I don't foresee a world in which you could lose, assuming that there aren't, exclusions in play or something like that. So it's helpful for you in the immediate sense of getting this paid. It's helpful for you in the long run if you're facing, possible litigation, because you will have excellent evidence to rely upon.
Yeah, and if you haven't done this and your stuff is on the curb, run out to your curb with your phone, start taking pictures of everything that's there, and then when you send all those pictures, it's on the curb. You can describe what it is roughly. Anything is better than nothing, and I'd rather have 16 pictures from kind of far away where you can kind of see what's there, and someone can rack their brains and go back and describe it. I'd rather have that than someone who just says, who isn't able to evidence that, and then down the line, when all the ability to take those pictures and describe what was there is gone, then to come up with a list at that stage, because an insurer's going to be they're going to be tempted to say, well, I don't know that you had all that stuff. These are a lot of expensive items.
Right.
And also, insurers are going to take the perspective potentially that, well, I mean, is it really reasonable that someone had 7 TVs?
Right.
But for all they know, you're a TV collector, or you had some obscure hobby where you collected something, or you were storing them and your plan was to sell them on. Like, who knows?
Right. Which
But
comes back to our rider discussion. If you've got the Van Goghs in the basement, make
yeah,
sure you've got pictures of those. Otherwise, it will be potentially a battle to prove that you would own these items.
yeah. And then other steps are adjusters love to speak with people on the phone, and they also love to record the phone calls. That helps the insurer. That doesn't help you. What you want is as much as possible for, especially if an adjuster is communicating something important, for them to put it in writing so you can read it, digest what they're saying, make sure you're following their instructions to the extent you need to, and then if they're saying something is or is not covered, we really need that paper trail so that we can, after the fact, say when they did not cover this, was that decision reasonable? And then we can potentially fight against it. If it's based on a conversation and months later you're trying to remember exactly what the insurer said, it all gets a bit tricky.
Yeah, it's good advice to think about. Like, always the worst case scenario. And if I had to bring a claim against my insurance company, would I have enough evidence to back that up? Can I just say, oh, I spoke to somebody about it. I don't remember when, and I don't remember what we discussed, and there's no record of that call. It's going to be hard versus I wrote to them 3 times via email, and these are literally the email history. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, and if you are having phone calls, have treat it in the same way that we treat our files. Like, have a document where you're noting, spoke to this person name on this date, this is what they told me. It's not as good as it all being in writing, but it's certainly going to be more helpful than the situation you said where it's months have gone by and you think you spoke to someone around a certain time and the adjuster's moved on and is no longer with the company and you don't know their name. That's when it gets really tricky.
Definitely.
So we'll just briefly talk about insurance brokers' negligence because it's something that's often overlooked, and then I think we'll talk about this Ontario government program that can also lend a bit of support. So, Stan, at what stage and when do we start looking into insurance brokers, and how do we know whether they did their job as distinct from the insurance company?
Yeah, it's not the first place that we go looking. Obviously, we want to see your policy first, and if there's coverage under the policy, then that's great. If there's no coverage under the policy and they're saying you didn't buy coverage for this, that starts to raise questions about whether or not your broker did the right thing in selling you the policy that they sold you. We have to look into what were the discussions that you had with the broker, what sort of representations were made. Uh, are you did you buy what you thought you were buying? Was it explained to you if there was an exclusion for coverage? So they're not the first place we go. The first place we go is to the insurer themselves. But if there seems to be a clear exclusion, it was, never under your policy, there was never going to be coverage for this, we can look into whether or not there should have been, or whether or not you are able to go to the broker and say, you didn't do your job getting me the right policy here.
Right. And it's not to say that, like any profession, there's the standard, and then there's members of the profession who are excellent, and then there's members of the profession that don't do their job, maybe even on a specific instance. And, no one's perfect, but sometimes insurance brokers can have a high volume of files, and communication is really important when they might have only met you once, so they might have had a couple of phone calls with you, and sometimes things get missed, things get requested that is not then arranged, or things don't get properly explained in terms of how endorsements work and what is covered and then what is not covered. And that can lead to situations where someone believes they are covered for something rightly.
Yeah, we see, like, so as you said, it's a mistake-based policy, right? It's negligence is
Right.
the legal term we use, whereas a claim against your insurance company is typically it's a policy contractual breach of contract case. If there's a claim against a broker, it's because they've made a mistake, right? So they've been negligent, possibly in their job, and the the factors that come into play here are what sort of conversations did you have with that broker? What representations did you make about your specific needs? What questions did they ask you about your needs? Was there a clear request that wasn't followed up on? That's usually, as you example you gave, pretty clear indication. But it is very fact dependent.
Yeah. So the final thing that we wanted to talk about is something I've been looking into because I heard it referenced in the news and I wanted to dig a little deeper. So uh, the province has this program in Ontario called the DRAO, the Disaster Recovery Assistance for Ontarians. And so this is something that's gets implemented and declared for a specific geographic area when there's a declaration of a disaster. And it's basically government financial relief for people who've been affected by a disaster. So presently, the province has declared a disaster in the Graham Creek and Stillwater Creek area, which is generally the Bayshore ish.
Yeah, just south of the 417 and east of Cedarview.
Yeah, that's it. And so not presently not the homes in Beaverbrook that are affected aren't covered by this. That might change in the future, but as of time of recording. And it's basically a process that works similar to insurance, but it's obviously a government funded program. So it's to do with essential repairs and basic contents losses. So it's going to be more limited in scope than an insurance policy. So, for example, for appliances, it's not going to cover your computer and your TV, but it could cover your furnace or your heating system or your air conditioning system or things that are considered essential. And the website is actually really, really helpful. We'll
Yeah,
try and
kudos to the government on that. I have to say, took a
yeah,
look at it, pretty clear.
straight
Well done.
straightforward.
Yeah.
What do I need to know? What's covered? Um, in any event, this is designed to kick in situations where insurance won't cover it. So it's not an option of you get the money from your insurance and then you turn to the province. You actually have to demonstrate that it is not covered by insurance, either because it's just not coverage you paid for, or something that's excluded, or something where the insurance company's just denied your claim, then you can turn to the province and say, this is something I need assistance with. The items I'm claiming are basic or essential and covered by the program. And they basically, it sounds like they kind of assign an adjuster to assess whether or not the items you're claiming are covered. You have to, all the same documentation requirements that we spoke about earlier with insurance claims, those will also serve you if you need to go through this program in much the same way. Pictures, inventories, descriptions of costs, descriptions of replacement costs, and potentially the difference is, say, you might have to forward some correspondence from your insurer where your insurer is saying, hey, this is not covered and this is why. And then the deductible, there's a deductible of $500, and then they will pay 90% of the eligible expenses up to a maximum of $250,000.
Wow.
So it could be pretty
Yeah,
significant.
it sounds like pretty good coverage. I mean, I think insurers should take note of the fact that the government of all people might actually be doing a better job looking after flood victims than the insurers. So
And
that's an interesting one.
yeah, and I think, looking through the list, it's basic and essential are the words that come out there that come up throughout, but they are quite descriptive in terms of what they will cover, and it didn't seem like it seemed still useful. It still seemed
Yeah,
like a very useful program.
well, I'm sure it'll cover like insulation and like you said, a furnace, etc.
Yeah, and so the key date you have to be aware of is the application has to be submitted by no later than November 16, 2026. So I would not necessarily even wait until your insurance company sends you a denial of something because the insurance stuff could take a while to work through. You don't want to miss this deadline if it's something where if you miss the date and then who knows? Is there a way around the date? Is there going to be some grace period? I don't know. But if they're saying November 16, 2026, everything you're inventorying for your insurance purpose, keep track of what they're saying they won't cover. And, if you submit something in this program and the government adjuster comes back and say, well, that's not covered, then at least you know you don't have an expense that could have been covered. You're getting someone formally say, hey, unfortunately, this isn't considered basic or essential. It's not covered.
Yeah. Sooner the better.
Okay. Well, as always, just in general, it's devastating to see all the pictures and the videos we've seen on social media about this. We all have either lived in the area, have friends who live in the area. Like we all know someone who's been affected by this in Ottawa. All the same principles we've said apply in any loss. If it's a loss to do with fire, if it's a loss to do with theft, a lot of these same principles apply, and they apply just as much if you get flooded in Barrie as they do in Ottawa. So if you have questions, we'd be happy to answer any questions. You can find our team at nelliganlaw.ca. If you have any comments, questions, you can reach out to us by our emails, which are on the website, or at civilbanter@nelliganlaw.ca. Stan, how do I find you on LinkedIn?
LinkedIn.com /IN/Stanford Cummings.
And I'm at linkedin.com/IN/H Mills McEwen. And if you could share this with anyone who might get some value out of it, we'd appreciate it.
That's right. Yeah. Like, comment, subscribe.
Okay, that's a wrap.